The longevity of any school is really the mercy of God. You can read all the leadership books you want. You can read all the books on classical education you want. But the truth is, it really all relies on the mercy of God. If he wants you to succeed, you can make so many mistakes like I did all the way through, and he's going to be the one to carry it through. We had so many times where, as probably you've already experienced, there's 11th hour things that come along, and you don't know how it's going to work out, and somehow the Lord just works it out for you. And sometimes you have to let go of what you want to see how the Lord is working in it as well. It really grows your faith a lot in starting a school. Many people call you crazy, and perhaps you are, but it's certainly a spiritual journey that you get to go on. And I'm delighted that the Lord called me to that. That was certainly not my intent as I was going through schooling and seminary. I thought I was going to go off and teach in college and teach philosophy. But the Lord said, why don't you go to a place that has abandoned the gospel and plant not only a Christian school, which nobody knows about in Maine already, but classical schools were certainly unheard of there as well. And I said, all right, yay, let's go do that. And so we did. But I'm not here to talk about many different aspects of classical education. As you are probably already familiar, there's a wide range of different things you could talk about with classical Christian education. I'm not here to talk about uniforms, though they're really important for a variety of reasons. I'm not talking about why you should ensure your children have the opportunity to fail in their education, though I think that's also really important. And I'm not here to talk about why you should be reading pagan literature, which I also believe is really important. Really, those are all important features, but what I want you to consider is just this one question, which I think gets more to the heart of a classical education. It is this: what kind of ignorance are your students carrying, and how are they carrying it? I'll ask that question again. What kind of ignorance are your students carrying, and how are they carrying it? So, it seems like an odd question. Maybe it is. But here's another simple question. What does it mean to be a Christian? Well, you might answer kind of etymologically, it means to be a little Christ, or a follower of Christ, or maybe someone who has received the substitutionary atonement of Jesus Christ on our behalf. All are great answers to that question, but I'll just put out how Paul defines it. When was the last time, if you are a Christian, you defined yourself this way? One who carries the unknowables of God. That's how Paul actually defined it in 1 Corinthians 4. He says this: this is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and the stewards of the mysteries of God. This is how one should regard us, as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Might not be how you have defined Christianity for a while. But to be fair, I'll give a little bit of context to Corinthians. If you're familiar with Corinthians, Paul is writing to the Corinthians to tell them, hey, this is what I've seen. It seems like there's a fraction growing here. People are dividing. I'm the follower of Apollos. I'm the follower of Paul. I'm the follower of all these different leaders. And he challenges them in chapter 3 to say, no, we're all unified around the gospel. It's not these different teachers who are saying different things. He's telling them, this is how I want you to understand us, is that we're the servants of Christ and we are the stewards of the mysteries of God. And in the New Testament, mysteries are often defined as something that has always been real, but it's been hidden until a current time. So this has always been true, but now it's going to be revealed to you. But the truth is, with all of these mysteries, they're never fully revealed. How could they be? There are glimpses of eternal realities, infinite realities. They're too profound for our souls. Paul did not say that he was a steward of what used to be the mysteries of God, but that he's a steward of the mysteries of God. What Paul is doing, and all faithful Christians are doing as well after him, is stewarding a profound mystery that reveals a deeper mystery, and so on. For instance, if you look at Christ and the redemption that he brought, how is it that Christ, as a member of the Trinity, could die? We know that he came and died on our behalf, and we accept that in the gospel, but as we press into that mystery, there's a point where we have to say, we don't know how that works out. But we hold on to it as true. A Christian is not permitted to simply discard the mystery because it's not easily rationalized. No, he's tasked with carrying the mystery forward to the satisfaction of his master. As Paul explains in verse 2, the standard of success for a steward is not how well they explained it, but it's that they are to be found faithful. It's not how relevant their message is, it's how faithfully they carried the mystery. In essence, the Christian is tasked with carrying forth the mysteries of God faithfully, whether he fully understands them or not. So, consider what this means for a classical Christian school. If a classical Christian school is to evaluate itself for its success, it must look at how well it is carrying these mysteries. Well, the question is, how do you faithfully carry a mystery? So, I want you to look at 3 distinctive marks of carrying a mystery. Number 1, you have to recognize at first that a mystery exists in order to carry it. The greatest mistake that a school can make is to believe its greatest task is to give knowledge. The second greatest mistake a school can make is to believe that knowledge is irrelevant. So the greatest mistake is thinking we're just here to give knowledge, and the second greatest mistake is to say knowledge isn't important. So let me make that clear. I'm not saying either of those things here. If a school believes its main function is to give students knowledge, the natural portrait of a graduate will be a student loaded with knowledge. He'll know a great deal about the world, and he will know that he knows a great deal about the world. If the school only tells its students to carry knowledge with them, they will believe knowledge is of the greatest importance. Well, where's the harm in that? Isn't that what schools are for? Isn't it to load them up with knowledge and send them out? I thought schools were supposed to teach knowledge. Well, here's the fundamental problem with that. If knowledge is seen as the end game, mysteries become the enemy to the goal. Mysteries, by definition, are unknown. Mysteries are not simply not known at the moment, but with some due diligence and research, they will be known. That's not what a mystery is. No, they can't be known. It's really the difference between these two statements. You might look at the Great Pyramids and say, it's a mystery as to how they built those Great Pyramids. And another person might say, it's a mystery as to how the body and the soul are connected. How do those two statements differ? Well, the first statement could be solved through greater archaeological research. If you've watched any recent archaeology, they actually think they found a papyrus that actually is detailing how the pyramids were built, with funneling canals right up to the base of the pyramid. And that's how those stones were moved. So maybe that mystery is solved. But that means it wasn't really a mystery in the real place. However, if you look at the body and the soul, how those two are joined, something that is completely immaterial with something that is completely material, somehow they interact with each other and intersect, but they don't share any of the components with one another. We're not going to find a papyrus that explains that away. We're not going to find some new scientific discovery that's going to make that known. It is a profound mystery to us. Mysteries are only really solved with revelation coming to us. Perhaps some more examples will help here. Consider what happens when someone claims to know something that is in a completed sense. Think of language. Most of us here would claim to know the English language, but what does that really mean? Likely, it means I can use it. I can use English words to communicate ideas and feelings and desires. Claiming to have knowledge of the English language, however, flattens the English language to pure utilitarian properties, purely use. Language is merely a tool, a thing I can accomplish with my will. Contrast this to seeing language as a mystery. Coming to understand language as a mystical thing, dare I say, a magical reality, has different implications. For the ancients, language itself was seen as sacred. And for many cultures, it was reserved only for religious leaders. If you're thinking right now that I am mad and am espousing gibberish, think of the power of words. On the negative side, verbal abuse, which flattened out is merely sound waves hitting eardrums and receptacles, would mean nothing. How could such an action be detrimental to the receiver's body? Or what is more, how could it be detrimental to a soul? How can words destroy other humans if they're only packets of information? On the positive side, how can saying "I do" bond two souls together? When we do not recognize language as a mystery to be carried out, but rather as a tool to be used, we don't understand it at all. Andrew Curran, the president of Circe Institute, writes this: "Everything has within it an inaccessible mystery, like the Holy of Holies. From a rock beside a stream to a poem to my wife, I cannot say I fully understand any of them, nor do I believe I can ever fully understand them. Why would I want to? To show off? To get a good grade? I cannot imagine how supremely uninteresting something would have to be for me to fully understand it." Let me read that again. I cannot imagine how supremely uninteresting something would have to be for me to fully understand it. Another example would be people themselves. When you claim to know someone, you flatten them out to an understandable dimension. With acquaintances, this might look as flat as, "He's the sports guy," or "She likes fantasy novels." With those closer to us, we may have more dimensions, but summing up anyone by their personalities, preferences, desires, and occupations does little to speak to the mysteries they truly are. Again, Andrew Curran states this: "To be a person is to be a mystery." When we flatten someone out to one dimension and claim to know them, we cease pressing in to know them more. When we claim to know God and cease to be knowing God, we are able to box him in somewhere. The call upon our souls, both to God and to humans, is to keep on pressing in to know further, to continue knowing always. Being a good steward of a mystery is to recognize mysteries as mysteries. Nothing that we teach is a checkbox. Nothing is ever complete. To teach the students that knowledge is simply a deposit of information from one mind to another is to present a false education and a false representation of reality. It teaches them to stop asking questions. In fact, questions are seen as weakness, a sign of a lack of knowledge or a doubt. On the asking, it's a confession of ignorance. And when asked, it's seen as an act of exposing another's ignorance. But when the world is seen as full of mysteries, questions become the tools of access instead of tools of weakness. They grant access to deeper questions and greater truth, goodness, and beauty. Well, that's what it looks like to possibly carry a mystery. But how do you actually accomplish that? Well, number two, carrying a mystery requires strength. Being a steward of information is not the same as being a steward of a mystery. Information requires nothing of the holder. You just deposit it in your mind. But a mystery is something that can't simply be carried in a mind. The Pythagorean theorem, when considered merely as a mathematical formula, sits simply in the mind as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But to the Pythagoreans, the relationship of the sides of a right triangle meant something much more than just a formula. It was revealing something true about the nature of reality to them. Particularly, they were unsettled when the discovery that the hypotenuse of a triangle with sides of 1 is the square root of 2, which is a number that cannot be represented by whole numbers, nor as fractions, and what we call today irrational numbers, undid their whole community. For them, they believed that all is number. And when they came to discover that something couldn't be represented with the numbers that they had, it forced a mystery onto them. And what happened as a result was how they reacted to that mystery. Pretty soon, the Pythagorean cult dwindled away because they couldn't hold that concept in their mind. Today, if you are taught math, well, you encounter irrational numbers, and we just see it as a set of knowledge that we have. But not until you stop and stare at irrational numbers, you begin to learn how great a mystery it is that this exists. They didn't steward it well. Well, what does it look like to steward it well? As seen with the Pythagorean cult, a mystery shapes more than just the mind. A mystery that which cannot be known when carried within someone has to be believed beyond reason. That means that something greater than the mind has to hold it. That is, the soul has to hold mysteries. Anything that a soul carries is shaped by it. But a mystery has great weight. Thus, the soul must have strength that does not come naturally. To attain this strength, the soul needs, according to 2 Peter 1:5, to supplement its faith with virtue. Thus, a classical education is committed to educating students in virtue. You've probably talked about virtues a lot here. The 4 cardinal virtues are understood to be prudence, justice, and fortitude, and temperance. Those coupled with the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, make a list of 7 essential attributes for a healthy soul. As you likely imagine, virtues are not simply taught through workbooks and multiple choice tests. Virtues are taught by being witnessed in the soul of another, of the teacher. This is why teachers are even more important to a classical Christian school than they are to any other educational institution. Because the students are learning their virtue from the teachers themselves. If we look at these different virtues, you can see how they play with mystery. Prudence. A teacher must have right reason in action. That's the definition of prudence. It means choosing the right way forward as it relates to everyday decisions. A soul that has prudence is not tossed to and fro by every changing variable throughout the day. There is a steadfastness of direction. Being a steward of a mystery means you have to have enough prudence to navigate life well. Stewarding the mystery, as discussed in the final point, does not mean hiding the mystery deep inside, but rather it means sharing and multiplying the mystery. How this is done and when is where prudence takes the lead. One has to have discernment. Students are not taught prudence through the life of a prudent teacher. Students that are not taught prudence through the life of a prudent teacher will use everything they are taught as a weapon. Logic, rhetoric, Latin, and a sharp wit will cause great harm to all those around them rather than leading others to an enchantment with beauty. Those that see the prudence in their teacher will know how to find the right time and the right place for what they're being taught to cultivate beauty in the world around them. Justice. Students need to see how the actions and speech of others are handled. A teacher should be the embodiment of the answer to the question, why should we do good? A student that does not know how to reject selfishness and prefer selflessness, even when no one else is looking or praising them, will be lost in self-doubt and victimhood. They have no energies to steward a mystery because they are too busy protecting themselves or clamoring to get what they believe is owed them. They forsake the beauty of the mystery for a fight over injustices they have experienced. Fortitude. No one can have the virtue of fortitude if they have avoided all risks. There's no courage when there is no room for failure, no room for fear. Fortitude and courage is not the ability to mute all fears. It's the ability to move forward through fear because something of greater value is on the other end. If one's life is directed by fears, avoiding all risks, the first thing that will be sacrificed is the mystery. Mystery carries too much weight. It slows us down and keeps us from running away as fast as we would like. Courage helps us hold on to something we cannot explain, but we understand that it is important. Temperance. A temperate teacher is one that governs or restrains his own passions and desires well. It's not just inordinate desires that need governance. For good desires, unchecked, damage just as much as bad desires. Proverbs 25:16 says this, "If you have found honey, eat only enough for you, lest you have your fill of it and vomit it." Too much of a good thing will cause you to lose all of the good thing. The Greeks had a Tantalus cup. It's a cup that is designed with a siphon in the middle, and so if you pour just enough wine in, you can drink freely. But if you're greedy and you pour too much wine in, it will siphon out the middle of it and empty itself, and you're left with nothing. Our culture is filled with slogans saying you deserve this, but the temperate student says no to most of those. If your soul gets everything it wants, it will be destroyed. Instead, the soul must yield to what will strengthen it. An unknown mystery easily becomes dead weight in the soul of an intemperate student. For if he evaluates everything according to the rubric of what brings him pleasure, the mystery holds no value. He could use that space for something more glittery, something with a pleasant scent. The mystery will be discarded before anyone has time to blink. Faith, hope, and love. It's easy to see how these are necessary. Without faith, there is no reason to trust that the mysteries of God find their value in Him. Without hope, there's no belief that the stewarding of the mysteries of God for a lifetime is even possible. Without love, there is no pathway on which to walk with this mystery. All three need to be present in order for these souls to be robustly drawn into the heart of God. These virtues build up a soul to hold on to those mysteries and to resist the urge to cast them aside when both internal and external circumstances change. Virtues make the soul strong and able to carry mysteries well. Number 3, being a good steward means faithfully using what the Master has given you, not hiding it away. As Paul defined, a steward is evaluated on faithfulness. Again, what does that mean? The parable of the talents is helpful to consider here. As you're well aware, Matthew 25 tells us the tale of a master that leaves a number of talents to 3 different servants. When he returns from his trip, he discovers 2 of the servants used their talents to double their talents, and while the 3rd servant buried his. He severely rebukes this 3rd servant for his lack of faithfulness. The point of a steward is to be faithful to the heart of the master. The 3rd servant didn't understand the heart of his master. The point of being a steward of the mysteries of God is to multiply those mysteries. That is, to spread the mysteries, to enchant the world with mysteries. Our world, if you have noticed, is severely disenchanted. Even within the deeply spiritual religion of Christianity, most Christians live disenchanted lives. Evidence of that might simply be the reaction to this talk. When was the last time your church talked about the mysteries or describing itself as mystical? It sounds a little too pagan. Though we are called over and over again to use spiritual eyes to see, we happily reserve ourselves to our physical eyes. Most of the time, we see evidence of God by what blessings he brings in our lives physically. The famous writer George MacDonald, who greatly influenced people like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and many others, wrote this: "In very truth, a wise imagination, which is the presence of the Spirit of God, is the best guide that man or woman can have. For it is not the things we see most clearly that influence us the most powerfully. Undefined, yet vivid visions of something beyond, something which eye has not seen nor ear heard, have far more influence than any logical sequences whereby the same things may be demonstrated to the intellect. We live by faith, not by sight." Again, a mystery is not stored in our reason. It's carried in our souls. It's not to be hidden there. A mystery is like a seed that should grow and change our souls from the inside out. If planted in fertile soil, it would produce truth, goodness, and beauty. What does this look like in a student? A student that truly carries the mysteries of God is transformed to believe that the world is a world full of wonder. He's alive to the workings of God, and his faith is not limited by reason. He lives a life that seeks the glory of the Master, even if it makes him look a fool. Blaise Pascal described a true education this way: "Knowledge has two extremes which meet. One is the pure natural ignorance of every man at his birth. The other is the extreme reached by great minds who run through the whole range of human knowledge only to find that they know nothing and come back to the same ignorance from which they set out. But it is a wise ignorance which knows itself. Those who stand halfway have put their natural ignorance behind them without yet attaining the other. They have some smattering of adequate knowledge and pretend to understand everything. They upset the world and get everything wrong." It's time to return to the quiz. So, on your quiz, you have 6 different items. The task was to see if you can identify them and then how they all tie together. Anybody have all 6 labeled? A good shot at it? All right, how about this? What's the first one under art? What do you think that's representing? Perspective. Okay, perspective. What is the center of getting a perspective right, especially in this one? The end goal. Okay, the horizon. What is the focal point called? Anybody know that? The vanishing point? There's a vanishing point which everything else is measured off of, right, to get the angles right. Okay, what about science? Anybody make out what that is? Not your eye, but it does involve light. Has anybody heard of the Young's double slit experiment? We got one in the back. All right. I see your hand, as we would say. So, interesting in science, you've probably heard this before, but the light source is being sent forth. If there is one slit, when you send a laser beam through it, on the other side, light will come through like a packet of information, like photons hitting one wall. It will be just one blip. But when you send that same light through 2 tiny slits right next to each other, what it comes through as is interference, like a wave. And so you'll see dark lines and light lines and dark lines and light lines. So just based on the slits you send light through will change what it behaves like on the other side. And so the big debate in science is light a particle or a wave? Because it acts as both at the same time. How about math? All right, imaginary numbers, right? Kind of like Pythagorean, but here it's the square root of -1. When you think in your head, what two numbers multiply together to get -1? You're left confounded, right? Because two negatives multiply together to make a positive, two positives multiply together to make a positive. And yet math demands that there must be some numbers that when you multiply them together become a negative. And that's called imaginary numbers. But they're important for math. Philosophy, anybody know that strange image? This is somebody, no? René Descartes, I think therefore I am, that guy. He believed that the soul and body met in one gland in the body, in the pineal gland. And so somehow that immaterial and material interacted there. And that's where they fit. How about history? Ever seen that image before? Okay, along that line. This is, the term for it is Ouroboros, which is Greek for a tail biter. Maybe, what's that famous? Never-Ending Story. If you've seen that movie, you might see some of this image. This goes all the way back to the Egyptians. All throughout history, this symbol would come up over and over again. And it has to do with the strange nature of time and how we don't understand it and how it seems to be repeating itself but not, and how it, in order to move forward, it has to destroy itself. The future destroys the past. You can't go back, kind of thing. And then, hopefully, theology is the Trinity. All right. That's actually part of our symbol in Mirus, is because it's the mystery that you're growing up in. Ours is a tree that you're growing up into the Trinity, because that's the ultimate mystery that has been around before time and will continue always. Okay, how do these all relate to each other?
So, like, things that don't seem as they are, kind of, like imaginary, like perspectives.
Good.
They all have a mystery.
All right, they all have a mystery, right. Here's the weird thing about reality, and this kind of highlights it. So much of our reality teaches that there is a necessity and an impossibility of mystery. There has to be a mystery, but there can't be a mystery. If you look at a vanishing point, the vanishing point itself is needed in order to do this kind of drawing, perspective drawing. But the vanishing point doesn't actually exist in the painting. It's not there. It's just a reference to make everything else work. That's true with all of this. There is a point, if you press far enough into any study, that you reach a mystery, which is actually the foundation for everything else to make sense, but you can't define what that is at the foundation. For theology to make sense, you need the mystery of the Trinity at the foundation, which everything else spills out from. The death on the cross. What happened to Christ on the cross? What happened to the Trinity on the cross? In Easter, as you're thinking about it, if Christ died, that's kind of bizarre. The Trinity changed, but the Trinity can't change. It's at the very bedrock of our faith is this profound mystery that has to be there because it gives meaning to everything else. But I can't explain it. But I have to have it there to explain everything else. That is what a classical Christian education offers. That is profound. You're not going to go to a talk at a public school and hear them talk about the necessity and impossibility of mystery as the foundation of it. And if you don't have a mystery that's driving your education, then it is going to be flat. It's going to not be alive. It's going to be dead. It's going to be storing knowledge for the regurgitation of it. A classical Christian education offers the most profoundness, meaning for life through the mysteries that it asks you to steward well. And so I'm really excited for the work that is being done here. I'm really excited for the opportunity of all these students to get that mystery embedded into them over and over again, and that they can steward it well for the glory of God in the future. Thank you very much.